Franken to you. But before you get to hear him, I'm the warm-up act. So be kind, I'm a rookie at this. Although I did spend 13 years as a teacher, so standing up in front of a crowd is not new to me. A little housekeeping, if you got your cell phone on you, please make it be quiet for this event. Because when you don't, sure enough, you're going to get a phone call and you're going to be like, oh. So let's save us all from
Is
that.
there the airplane mode, you turn it on?
I think airplane mode.
So you can still take pictures.
Right.
It's just the put your sound to either vibrate or
This is my good
silent.
side.
You don't need to go to airplane mode.
Okay.
Just your sound.
A little bit about me before we
Well,
start.
if I turn it down.
I'm currently serving as GIS coordinator, and that is a job of public service for Boone County. I've been doing this for almost 8 years. My goal in this position is to make information easily accessible to everybody, the public data, make it accessible to you so you don't have to call or drive over to the courthouse to find out every little bit of information. How many of you here are familiar with our Beacon website? A lot of hands. I'm the Beacon maker. So if you've noticed over the last number of years, a lot more data layers out there, like the FEMA floodplain. You used to have to go to the engineer's office and have them look you up to see if what part or any of your property was in a floodplain. Now you can look that up yourself on Beacon, anytime, not between 8 and 4:30, work days, no weekends, evenings, holidays. You can do it anytime. There's your school districts, your voting districts, and since those have changed, you might want to take a little look at that. If you're from the city of Ogden, don't worry, your voting district didn't change, although your polling place may have. But there's an app for that. I built an app for that. It's on the front page of the Boone County website. Down at the bottom of the news section, it says, "Where do I vote?" app is now available. So if you're wondering where you vote, you can either click on the map where you live or type your address in, and it will pull up, it'll highlight your district, because your district numbers are all changed this year. And it's once every 10 years, that's the thing. But, so the numbers are different, and unless you live in the city of Ogden, then you're not worried. And your polling locations, some of those have changed. Like for the one in the northeast corner, that district, northeast corner of the county, they're going to now vote, instead of going into the city of Boone, they're going to go to the expo center, which will be more convenient for them and separate voting out a little bit. And rural precinct 3 will now vote at the Woodward Resource Center instead of going into Maverick or Ogden, either one. So it might be a little more convenient for you. So if you want to find out that, when I first moved to Boone, I was the first office inside the door of the courthouse. It says information technology on it, but most people just read the information and came in and asked questions, right? And so I had questions about cemeteries. And so I went to our dispatch across the street. I also handle all their data. Talk to the sheriff and the dispatchers, they'll say nice things about me. But anyway, I asked them, do you have a map of the cemeteries? And they did. It was this big. And on that map there were 60 cemeteries. And the roads that you could read after, they were all numbered in random order and then numbered on and named on the side of it. So the whole thing wasn't even the map. So it was just a smear. And that's all they had for dispatching. So I went and had addresses placed on every cemetery, and I had to have the roads crew come in and show me where some of those were, because there was no authority. So now they have an address, and you can find them on Beacon. It's on Beacon. That's the secret. That Beacon website in Boone County, we got 4.7 million page views in 2021. Whoa, that's right. Accountants use it to look up property tax information because people come in to file their taxes and they didn't bring how much did you pay for any property? I don't know. They can look it up. Real estate agents use it all the time. Insurance people, are you in the floodplain? Aren't you in the floodplain? All that information is easy. So that has been my push. I either made a map for it, or a map for it, or put it out on Beacon where you can get to it. And a lot of innovation. I implemented our online permitting system. We used to, if you want to file a permit in the county, you have to go in 8 to 4:30, not a weekend, not a holiday. Take time out of your workday or leave work, or if you're a contractor, that's your prime work time. You have to leave the job site, drive to the courthouse, go to the proper department, file your paperwork, write a check, and then go back to work. Now you can do it online, anytime, day or night, pay for it by credit card online, file those permits. Yes, ma'am?
Well, I went to the courthouse the other day to see about renewing my driver's license. To come to find out, you have to have an appointment now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, see, that's DOT, that's not Clinton County. So
Yes.
they're running under a whole different set of rules, and I can't make that more efficient for you, I wish I could. But on a good note, they might give you 8 years, you don't have to come back to it. You used to always before, right? Okay, I grew up in Montana, northeast corner of Montana. We farmed several hundred acres and ran a couple hundred acres of cattle. We had irrigated down by the river, we had some irrigated hayland. I started out as a cowboy and a farmer, and still the same. You never get over that, do you? It sticks with you. When I was 10, I learned to drive. We had a 56 Ford pickup. It was cute. It was cute. And it had a fuel tank in the back. So if Dad's out in the field, I would drive out with some iced tea and some cookies and the fuel for it. And I was too small to run the pedals and see over the steering wheel at the same time, over the dash. So actually, I just steered and ran the ship. And my younger sister, who was 8, and her friend Brenda, so Brenda and Cindy would be down running what we call the foot feet. They were my feet. And we had one running go, and the other one ran stop. We didn't really understand about shifting and clutch and gears and all that, so we didn't bother with any of that. When it was stop time, she just leaned into both of those as hard as she could, and we made kind of a sudden stop. So, yeah, but you learn to make do and get it done with what you got. I am here today to ask you for the privilege of serving as your representative in the Iowa House come next January. This is the first round of applause, and maybe the last one. I will treasure it. Okay. And part of the reason I'm running is because I've noticed that our current legislature seems to be focusing a lot of time and our taxpayers' dollars, may I tell you, on what I consider a solution in search of a problem. They're bringing forth every radical bit of legislation that's passed in any state in the U.S., whether it affects us or not, whether it's a problem here or not. They take that legislation, white out the whatever name and put Iowa in there and bring it up and make a big old debate about it and waste our time. Some of this legislation, they're inflicting it on us, and some of this legislation is illegal. So then there's legal challenges to it, and who pays for those? All of us, right? Taxpayers have to pay for a legal challenge to something our legislature did. So I thought, you just really need some rational people in there who are going to spend some time. How about getting the budget done before you start attacking kids and teachers and librarians and all kinds of things that really, you can go to your school or you can go to your local school and talk things out if you have an issue with it. We don't need this legislation. Education is a big issue for me as a former teacher. I taught small schools, 100 kids, K through 12. I taught math, all math, computer science, K through 12, and I taught woodshop. Because if you've got any skills in a small school, you will. And I was a cheerleading advisor, having never been a cheerleader because I was always on a tractor. And, other duties as assigned. I announced the ball games around the clock. Those are good days. Those are good days. And our small rural schools are in danger because in Iowa, since 2010, they have never given the schools an increase that matched inflation. Every year it's been below inflation, which is a cut because the things that they have to buy, textbooks, hopefully pay their teachers a little bit, electricity, buses, you name it, cost of everything goes up and the amount of money they get doesn't go up the same. So they've been just starving our schools for 12 years.
Longer. Yeah.
Well, but the last 12 years has been the worst when you look at it. So when I was a kid growing up in Montana, I took the Iowa Basic Skills Test. Iowa was the gold standard. I have a friend who grew up on the East Coast, she took it. I have another one from California, they took it. Iowa was the gold standard for education in the whole United States. Everybody measured their kid against Iowa. Latest ranking I read, Iowa was 24th in the nation in sliding. And that's because, Iowans were justifiably proud of their education system and their public schools, and they vigorously supported them, and it's not happening anymore. Another issue that I'm really concerned about is childcare. Anybody have any thoughts about that latest legislation? Most of you have raised kids, right?
16.
Or been around them, nieces or nephews, somebody else's kids. They can now care for 7 2-year-olds, one person. 2-year-olds are potty trained, or else they're in diapers. And you're supposed to look after 7 of them. You can't even keep them all clean and dry in a day. And 10 3-year-olds, oh my word, they need help. I gotta go potty. And off you go, you leave the other 9 by themselves, or if there's 2 of you, you take 1 and the other person's got 19 to look after. It's insane. So this legislation was obviously passed by somebody with no knowledge of looking after little kids. And what parent thinks that is a good idea to have their child in that situation? I'm appalled by some of the stuff that's going on. So I said, okay, don't just complain about it, do something. And so this is what I'm doing. And this legislation is not going to alleviate childcare shortages. What we should do, how about we take and give vouchers for childcare instead of private schools? That way you could hire enough staff. All the parents could afford the outrageous prices. I once split my first teaching salary. I split it 50-50 with my daycare provider for 1 child. If you have 2 children, daycare eats everything that you earn. You can't afford to work. That's keeping people out of the workforce. There seems to be a crisis of workforce. Let's make these people that want to work, able to work, provide them some childcare. It'll help. Another thing, I have to talk voting rights. In 2021, the Iowa legislature passed a bill, and I wrote this down because I want to get it right. They reduced the number of days to vote early from 40 to 20. They reduced the number of days to vote by mail from 120 to 70. They closed all polls by 8 instead of 9. Sorry, nurses working that 12-hour shift. You're not voting, at least not on election day. They limited ballot drop boxes to 1 per county. 1 drop box in Des Moines is ridiculous. There'd be a line, you'd never get to it. They're prohibiting the Secretary of State and the county auditor from sending out absentee ballot requests, which they did during the pandemic. Everybody got one, you could fill it out and send it back in. They can't do that anymore. And a voter is now inactivated after missing 1 election. 1. You're inactivated. Now, that doesn't mean you can't vote, but it does cause some concern when you find out that you're inactive. But they can reactivate you at the poll on election day. But why? Can anybody tell me how this makes, it's supposedly a security bill. Can anybody tell me how this makes voting more secure? It doesn't change any of the methods that you can use in any way. It adds no security, it just makes it more difficult. And as a legislator, hopeful, I don't think it's my job to make your life more difficult in any way. In any way. I would like to make it easier. Maybe make election day a holiday. You go vote, you get your sticker, and then you go to the sales and you get an extra discount with your election day sale because you got an I voted sticker, right? Let's make it a big deal in this country. It is a big deal. I would like to allow and encourage drive-up voting sites. These have been really effective, especially I see so often young families where one parent goes to vote and the other one stays home with the little kids. Or else you have to hire a babysitter, which is basically a poll tax. So my thought is, if you can toss the kids in their car seat and drive through and vote, that allows more people to take advantage, and the more people who participate, the better our democracy functions. I have to smack one time real quick on healthcare. U.S. spends $10,637. This is information from 2018 per person on healthcare in this country. That's every man, woman, and child. That's our cost. Comparable countries in the world, our peers, they spend $5,527, or $5,000 less a year per person on healthcare with their national healthcare system. That's taking everything into account, all expenses. They have used more of their healthcare. We use less healthcare here for our exorbitant prices, and we have worse outcomes. If you line up all the top 20 in infant mortality rate, top 20 countries in the world in infant mortality, where do you think U.S. ranks?
Pretty close to that.
We're not even on the list. We don't make the top 20 countries for taking care of our newborn babies.
I thought you meant.
You said
You
infant
went the other way.
mortality.
No.
Yeah, the infant
No,
mortality.
we don't even make the top 20. We're further down the list than that. So I say it's time for a national healthcare system in this country. It's past time. The only people opposing it are those who are making money, like insurance companies and drug companies, because they can donate a bunch of money, keep the legislation on their side, and keep just raking it in from us. Anyway, we have a guest tonight, so I'm gonna call it. I could go on, ask any of my students. But do you ever have that teacher that you like to get him talking because they'll tell you stories about when they were a kid and the time's up and you didn't have an assignment? Yeah, I mean, that never happened to me. Oh, by the way, here's your assignment. Even if we did have a conversation there. But it is my distinct honor and privilege tonight to introduce you to Admiral Mike Franken. God willing, the creeks don't rise. This is our next U.S. Senator representative.
Can everyone hear okay? So just so you know, getting elected is the hardest job you've ever applied. It's a tortured tale. Say hello to Rebecca, my Republican tracker. Hello, thank you for coming. And thank you for a lot of notable faces here in the audience. Thank you so much. Closer, hi, hello, yeah. And very pleased to be here. My name is Mike Franken. My job is to beat Chuck Grassley come November. And I'm very pleased to do this. I've never been to Ogden before. Been to Boone many times. I've got a nephew living there, et cetera, but this is a new place. I'm very pleased to be here. What's going on downtown here?
The
The grocery store burned down and Fairway's coming in with a small town-sized grocery store. for
Oh,
all.
nice. Oh, nice. And Fairway, that headquarters is
Boom.
here. Okay, great. So terrific. All right, well done. And hopefully that'll be a boon to Ogden. Good. Okay, so my job is to beat Chuck Grassley. I intend to do this. We are cresting quite well. A little bit about myself. I'm a problem for the GOP. Many of the things that they have a tendency to say they own. rural Iowa. Mom was a one-room schoolhouse teacher, dad was a blacksmith coming back from World War II. A lot of kids, think small house, one bathroom, great possibilities in life. And regarding, as Penny said, education. All of us kids did well in school. The first 7 went to a one-room schoolhouse. The rest of us were more gilded. We got to take a bus to school, and but it all led to college. And we worked our way through college. I started at a slaughterhouse, got a scholarship in the United States Navy, took off, and had the privilege of leading sons and daughters, yours, around the world in some hospitable and less hospitable places. Was a ship captain, a commodore of many ships, a land forces commander in the combat theater, a lot of policy and strategy jobs, started a defense agency from scratch, a large defense agency with a lot of union people, and an opportunity, and was Obama's chief of legislative affairs. Early on, worked for Ted Kennedy. I'm an engineer and physics person by training, but ultimately veered into policy issues. It's great how interesting things happen to farm kids from Seacom. And ultimately, if you elect me to the U.S. Senate, which I anticipate we will be, Iowa will have a little bit of notoriety, being the most senior military officer ever elected to the U.S. Senate in the history of our country. And I think in the shadow of January 6th, that's probably not a bad thing. And as part of that the Democrat, I mean, it's being a Democrat. It is about democracy. You want to know how I vote, how I would think? First and foremost, pro-democracy, voting rights, etc. I believe it's imperative, and I do believe there's an assault on those basic principles in democracy. And as someone told me this morning from Colorado, that had Joe Biden not been elected, we would be having a completely different conversation in America today. He's a professor, and I think he was more right than wrong. So I'm very pleased at this opportunity. I am pro-education. And as you mentioned, healthcare, I'm the recipient of 40 years of VA/military healthcare system. It is the bang. It is what everybody ought to have. It should be a birthright. As Penny said, $5,000. The military healthcare system is even less that we assign for each person. Of course, we're a little bit healthier across the demographics of America, but we work on preventive care, dental care. We get going on these things early, and consequently we head off long-term negative consequences of undue health care. A host of other things. I am best prepared today because we're running perhaps a little late to mostly answer questions. So why don't I go straight into that? I will also say that we are, in this campaign, we're cresting very well. We're number 1 in fundraising. And that's somewhat, since not always our politics, a sense of meritocracy involved in this. Oftentimes the person with the most money for 90th percentile is the one that wins these elections. That's unfortunate, but it's the way it is in our system. We're doing well in that regard, and mostly because it's a serious time for serious candidates. Many of us grew up in the threat of nuclear annihilation, and with Ukraine and a number of other hotspots in the world, the dissension, divisiveness we have in our society today, it's time for really measured, steady hands on the tiller in our next elected leadership. And I should say that my job number 1 getting elected is to hustle on back here and rebuild a sense of progressivism in the state of Iowa from the ground up, from school boards, from rural to state house elected leaders. We have slipped off this. And as Penny was mentioning with education in particular, it's fascinating. There's no one on the Democratic side that's talking about defunding police. It just doesn't happen. Or that we need to emphasize critical race theory. There's just no such thing in our public schools, right? But there is an assault on which books we read in high schools. Imagine that. On teachers, on small high schools and the like. And some of these schools that used to lose a series of students due to private school, you lose teachers. You lose librarians, you lose access. And when that happens, schools combine. Pretty soon our schools will be much like our hospitals, distant. We've got to guard against this, folks. I got a lot of ideas. I can't wait to share them with you, but please ask me questions now. Yes, ma'am.
I've learned some new words since you've been campaigning. The first new word I learned was tracker. And the second one that I just learned this week was red box.
Oh, yeah.
Could you talk to us about red box?
Well, it was, politics. And so, and the Citizens United effort was the ability for dark money from unknown sources to get on board topics, is what it was designed for. But you can mutate it if a candidate posts on their website, oftentimes it's buried below a few hyperlinks, and it will show a raw video, what to say about a candidate, pictures, etc. And it's designed for a super PAC to come in there, cut and paste, bring over here, doctor it up, and do an ad for you or against your opponent. That's what it's designed to do. It's not illegal, it's it's skirting the law, perhaps mildly unethical. And so there's 3 of us running in this race. There were 5. 2 have since gotten out, both have endorsed us. And a military veteran and also a farmer to the north of you here in Crawford County. And, but one person has resorted to that frown face. And so we just mentioned it, because ultimately what usually follows from that is a hit out. And by whatever entity that is so endowed with money that they can do that. And the member, the person, cannot be aware of it. So that's why you put this up in a public site, and then you kind of walk away, so, whistle, I didn't do that. And they pull it off, and it's called red box. And there's no red box involved. That's what originally was done to highlight, hey, this is, wooga, 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 look at this. It's not done anymore. It's much more surreptitious now. I'm sorry it's happened. Citizens United has further polluted politics and made it even less tolerable in many respects. Yes, ma'am.
When are you going to debate the other 2 candidates?
The first one coming up is on the 7th of May, I believe. And then we've got 2 more after that, including one that's widely going to be displayed on various networks. So, yay for that. I believe also in the general election of the candidates who Senator Grassley would have to debate, I would probably be that one. That ultimately I would anticipate by, a poll was done last week by a corporation called Change Research. I'm 3 points behind him in a head-to-head matchup. And I would expect come post-primary, it's going to be much closer than that. And ultimately, he's going to have to do something because we are what's called crescent. And I will outwork him. I will.
You hope.
Okay, well, I haven't seen him since I've been in Iowa. I've been here almost 10 years and never once seen him.
Well, he comes back to Iowa, does his 99 counties, but he goes to the same places every time and the
Well,
same people every time.
Doing his 99 counties, he does, the Boone County Courthouse is one of his stops. I've been to every one since I've worked there. 2 of his staff members, or sometimes 1, sits in a conference room for 1 hour. They don't tell anybody that they're there. They put out a piece of paper for you to sign in. So I go in and sign in and tell them my views, but he's never been there. His staff has been there, but he has not.
He's at the Dairy.
He's at the Dairy Queen, yeah.
I'll be pretty accessible, sure. Sir,
You know, it just seems like to me, doing the right thing, like, Grassley is more partisan than doing the right thing, especially back, January 6th, and, it seems like there's a lot of GOP that's that way, or mine just bad.
I think your memory's pretty sound on this. And so if you, and I'll develop more refined talking points on this. But if you look at Senator Grassley's perspective in the 90s, when we had a hand in glove with Tom Harkin marching along, and what farmers will tell you today is that's really the halcyon time of getting bipartisan legislation passed. And I saw this in, I was in Washington DC at a federal executive fellowship, and I got hightailed over on the Hill, and ended up working for all people but Ted Kennedy. So I'm this farm kid, went to the University of Nebraska in an engineering school out west for physics, and I find myself working for the line of the Senate, very liberal on education, foreign policy, et cetera. But he taught us very well on how to get things done. And we worked across the aisle seamlessly. I walked in and out of Orrin Hatch's office, John McCain, you name it, John Warner. It was common. And that's the type of person I think Chuck Grassley was back then. Today, you don't see any of that. Matter of fact, he had the opportunity of the day at a town hall very much like this, when a person stood up and said, what are you going to do? This is on video. What are you going to do about those people that are kept in, those patriots that are kept in gulag-like situations in prison because of the conspiring Capitol Police and FBI? Just so you know, those two entities never talk to each other, but conspiring entities who threw them in jail just because they were protesting a fake election. So now to respond to that, you would think a leader, the president pro temp potential in the Senate, would have, well, wait a minute. There's about 5 fallacies in what you proffered as that question. And let me go through it. But no, he says, yeah, the judiciary really needs to work a little harder on this next question. Now that is an abdication of your responsibility. And as an adult, not as a senator, as an adult, to let that playground antics continue. Shame on you. That's what's happened. Now, whether it's his frailties, the easy manner in which his staff finds just go along with Mar-a-Lago, because it's a great funding source, it's too hard, or I think my candidacy surprised them. And this is, I have a problem for them. They will have a problem in going against my roots.
Let's make it a big problem for them.
And I kind of relish this opportunity. And this whole business about he's a farmer, I have more farming history than he does.
So do I.
I think the librarian here probably does. He left in 1958, and he was actually working at the John Deere on the line. So from slaughterhouse work to working at some fabulous farmers, cousins. I'm the grandson of homesteaders, both sides. That's what we are.
I worked in the slaughterhouse myself.
Yeah. So did you ever talk about politics across the Chitlins table?
I don't remember talking any politics.
Today, but the decisiveness of today has introduced that. And it's a shameful thing. Iowans are better than that, and we need to do better. Man.
I'm concerned about the
women's issues and the erosion of equal rights, we'll say, or we're all under the same constitution. It seems like since COVID and so many people were home, even before that we're now back to being
Second-class citizens.
second-class citizens, and your place is in the home, and things like, my husband died early on, and I had to raise my daughters. I have 2 daughters, I'm concerned for them, and 2 granddaughters. But I was becoming so,
Inhospitable.
yes, for women, yes.
That's hugely lamentable for me personally. There was a time, my sister Dorcas, matter of fact, and her husband, both in the medical community, doctors, moved back here specifically to raise their kids because of the altruistic availability of public high schools in Spirit Lake, Iowa, and a place to build a practice. He was a hand surgeon, and a great opportunity for her, et cetera. They just loved it. And it brought, ultimately, I had 3 sisters living in Dickinson County at one time. It was the place to be, and it was quite the romper room. Today, no one's there. I had one sister who had to move with her daughter to help with childcare because 2 adults with 3 incomes and they're scraping by and they need help with childcare. She's a nurse, she needs to work. But that's the typical story. And regarding your issue, from reproductive rights to going after Planned Parenthood, it's just the tenor of it all, which is hugely unhealthy. When I was in Africa, I was a senior military officer at the time. And you show up and immediately you're staffed, and I got a big staff and thousands of people, mostly Army, Air Force, et cetera, not a lot of Navy, but they kept saying, what's your philosophy here? What's your strategy here? What are we supposed to do? Because we work the humanitarian, development, and defense aspects, all 3, bridging across multicultural, multinational series of lines. And I said, look, everybody staff, all the programs that are concentrated on women and children, continue those apace, and we'll look at all others. Because those 2 programs dictate how society goes. True. And here's another story. So the president of the country, I had a facility there. I said to him, dear sir, thank you very much for being a host. What may I do to help you pay back your hospitality? He said, make my people live longer. That's a tough one, because life expectancy was very low in that country. Well, it's a Muslim country. So we looked at it over the weekend. I came back to him and I said, we're gonna double the size of your medical college, and we're gonna add a women's wing, because right now it only does men. And then we'll build clinics in the hinterlands along with wells, solar powered, et cetera, to live in, to school in, and to treat. And with your permission, we'll get going on that. He said, do it yesterday. So we did, and ultimately today, as you look at the life expectancy in that country, it goes like this, and then there's a curve, there's a need. And that's what happens, because they concentrated on OBGYN issues, mostly, and a few other incidentals. And that's what changes things. And in America, yeah, I would, if I was, as a female, as a male, I'm embarrassed in this state to be associated with the State House, frankly. And wherever I went growing up, wherever I was, everybody knew I was smiling. They made a big point of doing that. Because we had this culture, this rather broad, liberal mindedness where we really got stuff done. You know we were educated. You know we were brought up well. You knew how we had this environmental underpinning because we treated Mother Earth well, et cetera. We treated each other well. I'm less pronouncing of that in bios, biographies these days. Because we're more Missouri-like. That's not nice. That's too far. But you know, shame on us. And, but this too will pass. We're in a transitory period. It's gonna be hard. And I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna be a loud hailer to this. Yes, sir.
My concern is a lot of Democrats that used to be Democrats now because of Trump, Fox News, Chuckles Grassley, and all this right-wing stuff have switched. And they're hardcore. You can't even hardly talk to them. How do you address that issue?
So if you look at the divisions of the various parties, about 38% of Iowans are independent. And that group are the reason why counties go from 22% for Obama, rural counties, to 20% for Trump. A 42-point swing, think about it. And that's not because there was an immaculate conception of Republicans that just suddenly showed up, or that Democrats took off. It was those independents and Democrats not showing up, and the Republicans being better organized. Let's face it.
And more aggressive.
And say again?
More aggressive.
More aggressive, and more aggressive. I've had we've got a series of county commanders, people who are touchstones in each county. Some have scraped their bumper stickers off because they don't want their cars keyed.
Yeah.
That's where they are. And where in the caucuses, they had hecklers that just drowned out, they had to lock the door and put hecklers on.
My brother lived in Florida. He could not put a Biden sign in his yard because they were damaging property in his area.
So they're not at 51%. They're in the 30s. Our numbers are such that we need 65% of the independents to vote our way if we win.
Do you think Chuckles Grassley is going to debate you?
Probably not.
He will not.
He will not. But I'll make life hard. We'll have a Rebecca equivalent where he is, and get what he says, get what he doesn't say. And, you know, even some of his followers. I've had pull-asides from my farmer friends in Northwest Iowa. Here's an example. The kid I grew up with, he's a couple years older, shot BBs with, caught frogs with, worked, mowed lawns, cooked a turtle one day, bad idea. Gave me a hug, most successful person I've ever met, really a touching moment. He says, I'll never vote for you. I'll never vote for you. I just won't, because you're a Democrat.
Yeah.
The worst Democrat is better, the worst Republican is better.
Yeah,
than the
so it's like, Orland, I understand, and thank you for raising your family the way you have, and staying in Lebanon, Iowa. Now you're one of 12 people that used to be 50. But I pulled his wife aside and said, Eva, we'll chat about the future of your granddaughters and grandsons in the state. She listens. So the subservience-ness of some spouses, which you can see, that's not there in the voting booth.
That's good.
That's right.
60% of the people who vote in this election are women. Yes, ma'am.
Can I tell you a little funny story? Just
We need a little humor.
My grandfather was a Republican when he married my grandmother, who was a Democrat. And my grandma told me, you can't cancel my vote. He changed to Democrat. And my gentleman friend, who thinks he's a Republican, did not vote for Trumpy Dumpy either time. And he voted for Biden. And he said, whoever is running against Grassley has his vote.
I entered this race at the urgings of people like Tom Arkin that said, we can win this. And 8.8% of Iowans have a veterans background, one of the highest in the country. we just, politics were not part of us in our line of work. Nobody cared who the person next to you was. We're trying to get to the point where you don't care what the gender is, you certainly don't care where they're from, nor how they were born with a silver spoon or not, et cetera. It's certainly not the part. I believe that many of those will say, you know what, Franken's one of us. Rural Iowa, I don't know. Have you been to Chuck Grassley's hometown? It looks like the Duragio went through and nothing was done from it since.
Western Iowa, southwest Iowa.
Well, Southwest Iowa. But I mean, there's one person who's been around and has watched this happen. Uno, in Iowa politics, and it's him. And to be now a spokesperson for a whole bunch of things which he absolutely doesn't do. Last quarter, he took $325,000 or so from super PACs. How many times did he vote against Medicare, Medicaid, ADA, and reducing drug prices? 10, 12, 13 times? It's what he does.
But some of your policies, you're gonna be granted as socialists. I can already see it now.
This is, so just so you know, okay, farm kid from Iowa, socialist, I got it. I belong to a co-op. A co-op and socialism are Venn diagrams that interact. I belong in the military. The military does a socialized medicine. Everybody's treated the same. I started out enlisted, I ended up as a 3-star admiral. My treatment was the same. I didn't get special privileges in the dental line, the shop line. It's what you do. You know what? Socialism? Oh, you mean like farm subsidies?
Yeah.
Where 40% of the income of farmers, what, 2018? Are you kidding me? These are the entities that want CO2 to get piped in pipelines to be paid for by the US government, double indemnity subsidies, so a private entity can be profiteering from it. That's a loser proposition. Let's use the heat and the CO2 from ethanol here for in situ operations, and we can do that. I'm happy with these conversations. Bring them on. We're on the side of right here. Let's not cower. I do push-ups with my will.
All right, nice to see you again. That was kind of alluded to with your comment there. You talked, the guy you were talking to just kind of laid into you because you were a damn Democrat or something like that. And then you talked, and then you said, well, situation like that. And you talked to his wife, and the last statistics I saw is basically. On the women's side, if they're like younger, up through about age 55 or 60, kind of the number of people who are almost automatic Democrats is like 25 to 30%, and will go Democrat, and then by the time you get 55 and 60, it's almost a 50-50 deal. So what I see is a problem with recruiting. In other words, you could go out to a random gal on the street and say, are you registered to vote? And if she says no, register her. And the odds are well in your favor that if they're going to vote, they'll register Democrat.
So here's the story. So I'm in Sioux County, it's a Thursday night. Where I'm from, my farmer buddy, best friend in high school, you go to the bar. You go to the bar. And for a beer. And the place is
That wasn't
packed.
in Orange City, was it?
No,
I used to live in Orange City.
Sioux Center's viewed differently. They actually welcome immigrants. They're actually building a Catholic church. Shocking. I mean, I was a Lutheran. We weren't really permitted to talk. So it's progress. So I walk in the bar. It's full of Dordt College kids. Dordt College is a reform school up there that's pretty strict, et cetera. And some people from Northwestern in Orange City, which you know. And the bartender knows me. So she's like, hey, everybody, we have an admiral in here, and he's a Democrat running for the US Senate, and he's from here. So faces all looked. She was quite the bartender. She demanded attention. And so there's 30, 40 people in that place, all young mostly. And someone said, why are you a Democrat? So I said, oh, well, so happy to have this conversation. List to me, there's a Jeopardy moment, the things which Republicans have done that have changed your life or your parents' life. Ready? Go. I'll buy a beer. So everything except for the music, they all took it seriously. They all took it seriously. And time went by, a couple people came up with ideas, and no, that's not right. That was done during Eisenhower administration, but it didn't stick. It was repealed, in 1962, et cetera. So finally, it was somebody said, clean air, clean water. And I said, well, 1972 Nixon had threat of veto, he didn't pass it. And one seat over, woman leans out and says, well, that's good. I said, yes, repealed in 2018 by Congress. Ooh, sadness. Which got me up on my governor. So I started listening from women's suffrage to the Affordable Care Act, to the GI Bill of Rights, to Marshall Plan, to you name it. Social Security. Social, yeah, small matter. If you don't think Social Security is on the chopping block,
Oh, yeah.
it's very much on this. And absolutely. So is Medicare, so Medicare. Just absolutely.
That's what those Medicare Advantage.
Just look at Rick Scott offered as a platform. Be afraid. And in Iowa, most people, that $3,000 a month means something substantial in retirement.
Or less.
Or like, I mean, it becomes, I don't know, what is the number, Maddie, you remember 40% of Americans rely on that almost exclusively? So that's a bad news bear. So I went through this list, and it was quiet. Listen, you were raised in a religion, just like me. You were raised with a line of thinking, what was on the TV every morning, what was on the radio during the day, what your parents said. You are now in college, you're now adults, you're now drinking age. You are free to think and make your own decisions in life. Think about it. I did, others have, your teachers, etc., your professors, why are they being confronted on their belief system? Educated, more broadly experienced, multiple zip codes in their history. They know more. They think more. Perhaps you ought to think more as well. It's up to you to decide what kind of a future you want. And there's a lot of business cards, a lot of handshakes on the way up. Is anybody from 4th District here?
We're all 4th district. You're looking at
I
it.
find one out, but not very nice.
Sorry, yeah, okay, sorry, that's right. Remember where I am?
Yeah.
County? The person who leaned back and said, well, that's good, isn't it? That was Feaster's daughter. From Ohio. I thought that was all right. And we were in nice chat. I know the Feasters, of course, grew up with their cousins, etc. But that was very unique. And this place was listening. Those of us were. So the rabbi in Sioux City, I'm a resident of Woodbury County, said, do 3 things for me, Frank. Go to the universities, the colleges, and see the young people. Chat with international affairs, whatever it may be. Trade policies, agriculture, science, sort of things, NASA. Go to a place of worship every weekend, a different place, evangelical Christian church, to mosques, etc., Hindu, Muslim place, and go pheasant hunting with me. Bring your camera. And that's the type of outreach in Iowa. The command, or the campaign, I keep going back to command. The campaign strategy is to knock on every Democrat's door once, Republican door twice, and independent door thrice. That's the winning strategy. And we're putting together a field program that closely approximates what Pete Buttigieg had. Outreach, reaching across those aisles, reaching and being commonsensical, pragmatic. What can we do? What do we need? What's number one on your life's list to get satisfied? We've gone through a couple of these things. Penny did this. And then the funding stream coming from very similar to what Bernie Sanders has. Average funding stream of $27 or something like that per person. A new donor every 3 minutes across the United States from us just happened. People want a serious candidate, and they want a loud voice who's pragmatic yet progressive in the U.S. Senate.
Don't forget those smaller races.
Well, so just on that matter, we are implementing, and it's slow stop to, when you buy something from our website, ultimately, the 15% proceed that usually goes to me, our campaign, goes to the county chair of the zip code that it gets shipped. It's more important for them than it is for me. So I don't think we're the only ones. I think it's legal. I don't push that envelope so much.
We appreciate it.
But that's the thing to do. And we'll get that riled up here. We get signs and bumper stickers and coffee cups, et cetera, et cetera. And the proceeds, you use as you wish. Use it for somebody else.
We'll support Democrat candidates.
Use it to paint the lines, whatever you want. So that's the intent, to always be the senior person in the party that looks after those coming up. And I don't say below me, I say coming up. Sir, you've already asked for your allotment here.
I get too. What do you think about climate now? It seems like GOP don't want to have nothing to do with it. But,
Climate's not gonna ignore them.
you know, I
They can ignore it, but it's coming for it.
We're in trouble in the world, you know.
Here we are.
You're not elected.
So people say we got to stop climate change. That's not going to happen.
No, it's not.
It's not going to happen. So we've got 325 million in the United States. There's a series of things we can do, and we are doing them slowly. What we should really be focused on, along with like-minded countries, is emphasize the areas of the world, I'm hesitant to say the developing areas of the world, but the areas of the world that would like to achieve a standard of living that closely approximates ours. India, Central China, all of Africa, 1.3 billion people in Africa, and the fastest growing nations in the world in Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia. They want to be something like us, and they deserve to have a refrigerator, right? Sure. Yeah. They can't have that heavy carbon footprint of development like we have. We need to short circuit that, jump it up. LED light bulbs, for example, game changer, designed for places like Africa. Photovoltaic cells, et cetera, small micro electricity development areas, broader DC distribution of geothermal, hydro, et cetera, sources, and a variety of others, to bring them to a level. Just like most countries don't have landlines anymore, how can we bring them into a place where they don't have, you name it, the type of agriculture? So this is the plan. This is really needs to happen. Here, there's a host of things that should be done. And as a person who's done water policy for Stimson Center for some time, that's my forte. And I want to make Iowa's farmers, agriculture in the Midwest, not to be the villains with clean water. Where's my water? That water jug. this is not bottled water. This is water from your faucet in this bottle. I carry these around. I test water wherever I go. And I grade it internally to myself. Just so you know. This is important. And you're okay, but you're not delicious.
Ames water is better.
Ames water is better. It certainly is. Knoxville's water is bad. Just FYI. So there's a host of things we need to do. And changing the manner in which we farm is one of them. And I'd like to be a leader in that regard. And I would like to do it hand in glove with organizations that are resisting it today. And it's another story. Sure.
What's your position on passenger rail? China went from building steam engines in 1988, now they run a 300+ mile per hour maglev train. And we've got Amtrak,
Well, we don't here.
just Southern Iowa.
Southern Iowa. We're clacking along.
Yes.
So, Tony or Terry Branstad had a chance to say, would I sign up Iowa for a high-speed train? Right? And he said, niche instrument. In my world, a levitated direct current train, as you say, levitated, zipping from Chicago to Denver isn't something that's feasible. It's something we should be working on now. As is 20 years ago, as is a train from Minneapolis to Kansas City. As ultimately, those are the two spines. And then from that, like tree roots, the hub and spoke method. It's what Europe does. And having lived there, it is the greatest thing. We adopted a special needs girl. She traveled by herself in a country whose language she doesn't speak because the trains are on her watch, on her phone, understandable, walk up, this train I know goes there, boom, because it's right here. Oh yeah, absolutely. Blind people getting on the train because they know time is such and such, I know this is my train. You don't have to say anything. That's the system. That's the network. It's possible. I'm a big fan of that. Imagine if you've got a train conduit here that you can work in Des Moines. What would that do to the surrounding communities? What would Grinnell be like if you and your spouse, your partner, could do this every day? Hop on a high-speed train, 40 minutes later, be dumped off inside Iowa City, or 20 minutes later, be downtown Des Moines. For pennies on the dollar.
Well, I believe the
A lot more
Republican,
opportunity.
It changes a lot. And we have in a carbon tax environment, which I wish we would do. Iowa's in the catbird seat with our solar, with our wind, with our ethanol potential, using ethanol as a power source for generation. We could do wonders.
the Republican argument about high-speed rail is it won't pay for itself, but neither do airports.
Well, I don't know what the return on investment, it's not a 7-year return on investment. It's much more distant than that. But you have to calculate what return on investment really means. What does that really mean? How many cars would you have if you lived in Grinnell and your partners work both ways? Would it be 3 or would it be 1? And would that car be self-drive and plug-in? Yes, it would be. That's the future. And it's not what after we've all been dead and buried. It's available now. We got to get on board. It would be good for Iowa. And hopefully bring back, what I really want to say here about children is I want this generation, this next generation, to at least consider staying here. Quit exporting our kids and have the opportunities here in a wage structure, in a business environment. Imagine if you're a plasma arc welding service, a machinery, a high energy machinery company. Imagine if you are a data processing center and you've got the cheapest power in Iowa and you happen to be in the middle of the country with great transportation options. Why would you go to Arkansas? Especially when you've got a workforce that's talented, dutiful, and educated.
And they're leaving the country, they're leaving the state about as fast as they get educated.
Think big, think broad. I specifically chose to come back after a 30 or 40-year hiatus. And it was a very measured decision because, if not me, who? And I just was frankly disgusted with Iowa. We need to do better. We really need to do better. Okay, so, yes, ma'am.
Shifting gears a little bit, criminal justice system. I think probably most of us in this room would say that the war on drugs was a failure. But
Not for the penal services.
no, well, yes, that's true. It's a for-profit system. It's yeah. But it's clear it's racially and economically biased. So if you're not white and you're not wealthy, but what kinds of changes would you see at the federal level, which is what you would be dealing with in criminal justice and the legal system that would make it more fair and equitable?
I think the state, as in the nation, has a role in, obviously the state has, supposed to have a monopoly on violence on the citizens, right? I mean, in the true sense of this, no one else in society should be able to have violence on other citizens other than the state, as in jail, incarceration, et cetera, et cetera. And violence is a broad term, meaning doing something against your will. That's this responsibility of the state. It's why we have the judiciary. We shouldn't have private prisons. And on that matter, I can't go around this issue without talking about mental illness. Because every sheriff I speak with, these are the numbers, heavily curated. 60% of the occupants of the county jail are there for mental issues, for men, and 40% for women. There's no other place to go. So it goes hand in glove with our medical system. And what we did with good intentions back in the 70s that were coming to roost now, and homelessness, et cetera, it's bad. On the federal side, there's recite the things in various studies I've read. But how about we just start basic and take things like marijuana and treat it like alcohol. And it's controlled, it's a controlled substance. And you don't throw people in the hoosegow for marijuana possession.
Responsible consumption.
Responsible consumption. And here's I bet you if we did that, guess what would happen? People would quit taking. Oh, and it would cause all sorts of criminal problems, and a lot of border issues would go away as well. Regarding the other drugs, which mostly come in oftentimes in the postal service from places like China, we can demarche China and stop this from its source. Really work on it. What would you suggest? What else?
Well, I was looking at mostly in terms of race and poverty. For instance, somebody gets picked up and they're held really without charge, but they can't pull bail. So they're stuck, because they can't get out, and yet they have no charges against them, and yet they can't even get out of jail. That's,
So they can't go to work, they can't make money, they can't make the car payment, they lose their car.
and
they
then
lose
they're
their house.
charged for all the time they're incarcerated without even a charge being leveled against them. The criminal justice system it's really against you if you're poor or if you're a minority. 1 in 3 black men will be incarcerated at some time during their life, whereas for white men, it's something like 1 in 17, which is still pretty appalling.
Well, we are the most incarcerated of all countries.
Exactly.
It's bad. So here's
Number
the-
1. We're number 1 in incarceration in this country.
Nothing to cheer about. Living in Stuttgart, Germany for 2 years in my career. It's a city of 2.5 million or something like that. Industrialized city, a lot of industry. And Porsche and Mercedes are built there, headquarters. And they had, I think, 3 shootings in the 2 years we were there. 3. And one was a suicide, one was a domestic, and one was two men mad at each other.
I don't think they have the amount of gun ownership.
No, well, they treat it differently. So now I'm glad you mentioned guns.
I've got a bunch of them.
I bet you do.
But what we've advocated in America is the responsible gun ownership. I did a little, I was in Nevada a couple of years back, and I walked into a gun shop, and I said, hey, that Glock, how much? It's $895. He said, it's yours. I'll give you a good price. I said, well, I'm not a resident. He says, you got an address, don't you? Staying at a hotel. What's the address? Okay. That is gun ownership in America. This is Nevada had just had 50-some people shot to death with a guy with bump stocks and a series of AR-15s. How many animals can you hunt in the state of Iowa with an AR-15 legally? Anybody know?
Zero.
None. Well, actually, bobcat.
Wow.
Have you ever known anybody hunt bobcat in Iowa? No. Okay, I grew up with firearms. As comfortable with them as anything, but I'm a responsible gun ownership person. In Switzerland, Germany, etc., responsible gun ownership. It's so onerous to have a gun at home that most people keep stored in lockers at a range. And to go hunting, go fishing, etc., you gotta be tested. Military sells firearms, congressionally mandated, we sell firearms that we don't use anymore. Do you know that? You can buy a military rifle, but you have to go through a training program. It's a 5-step process. To the best of my knowledge, a person who's gone through that process has never been charged, never conducted a mass shooting. Think about it.
What about license, so like you need a license to drive the car, why not a license
Well,
to?
it's common sense stuff, but, so Chuck Grassley and his counterpart in the Senate, they have voted against this. Matter of fact, they make this a big deal. And as a military person, responsible, I have a facility very much in a combat zone, quite a people walking around, I pack back here. But not everybody's trained on firearms, but only those people who are on watch could have a firearm and had a very controlled engagement procedures, etc. Most people did not have a firearm, and all were qualified, unlike in America, and psychologically qualified as well. And in America, I walk into Walmart and see somebody carting around a 9mm on their back. It's like, are you out of your mind? Or let alone sitting in a bar. I've seen that too. I do it about face, because I don't trust that person. And nor should I, because we don't have a standardized process in America. And policemen, consequently, are scared. I don't blame them. You never know. Chances are you're gonna be outgunned. This is, frankly, the consequence of a small percentage of America with a part of GDP that's insignificant. It's the GDP of M&Ms, for God's sakes. Yet they control this big dialogue and are responsible for so many suicides. 85% of suicides conducted with a firearm are successful.
But they're hellish salesmen.
And isn't now firearms death the number one cause of death in kids?
Children, kids.
Number one,
Yes.
the number one person to die with a firearm is the owner. Number two is that person's love interest. Number three is a family member. Those are statistics cast in stone. So we're all okay with that. And here, ladies, women, the love interest, since the majority of gun owners are men, becomes the female oftentimes, vast majority of the time. The person who, the female's left over to care for the guy because he shot himself, or the woman is the target, or a kid, or a family member, and she's gonna lose that man in her life anyway. So he's going to the big house. So it becomes a woman's issue. Left holding the bag once again. Last question, please.
And Joni Ernst voted against closing the boyfriend loophole and the violence against women.
And the violence against women, which just, you know, we have the Violence Against Women Act in the military. We're very so happy to take firearms away from somebody in the military who's got a domestic problem. Not a problem. Consider it done. We've been doing it for decades. And yet we can't do it in civil society. When you have a firearm that can go through the walls of your house and through your neighbor's house. Crazy. It's absolutely absurd. It's a craziness. And it's part of this. Think of the cultural strings that we can pluck. The CRT, or burning books, or doggone teachers, socialism in school, taking parental rights away from what kids learn. My mom never knew what I was studying in school. She was a school teacher. We went to PTA. I was in the school board. There was an element of trust. Teachers, when I grew up, drove Buicks, for Christ's sakes. They were big members of society. Other things, those who are, who identify something other than they were born sexually. When did they become available in society? Well, obviously color and race and stuff, and religion have been for centuries, millennia, a big problem. Well, let's not string those chords. Let's rectify those out of tune chords. Appreciate your assistance in getting elected. Appreciate you involved in social media. If you think we can do this, I'm quite sure we can. And appreciate your supercharging our efforts. Appreciate you financially. Help us go. Keep us on the road. We're on a 3-day-a-week road trip usually. You know, this is close enough to Des Moines and elsewhere where we just do these day trips and race on back. We will soon go to 4 days on the road, and ultimately, as May goes on, 5 days on the road. I'm on a roll. I've actually spent 2 days in a row in my bed here. This is the first time in over a week. So appreciate what you can do to keep us going. And we will change the ad that's on TV and do something a little shorter, do a different construct. Do take your social media and amplify our message. And thank you for whatever you can do. This is Maddie. Say hi, Maddie. I've gone from being a commander of 8,000 people to answering command. I'm okay with that. I'm over time, she said. Okay, so she's right. Thank you all.
A couple quick things. We have another candidate in room. Chris Duncan, please stand up. She's been in office for longer than she's been alive, I think. 25 years, she claims, and she's only 30, so she started really young. And she's up for a re-election, so help support her. And remember, campaigns run on several things, but cash and volunteers are two of them. So if you can do either of those things besides amplify a message, spread the good word, we all appreciate it.
If anybody wants a quick picture, I'm happy to take a picture with them.
Oh, first.